Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the members. Today is a day in which we're looking at a chapter that is approximately 500 pages long and includes about 106 different separate retirement systems that are contributory. This particular amendment is zeroing in on an area that I have continued to very much beat the bush about, and that is having to do with our quasi-public agencies, our independent boards, and also our authorities. Now, we will have some people that will disagree with terminology, but I would dare say that if we have not an ability to even identify what actually constitutes an authority separate from an independent board, separate from a quasi-agency, and being able to get a list of that, we know there might be 52, there might be 57. Some of us don't know whether a collaborative or an actual center that might be set up with an independent board constitutes an independent entity. So all of those things are left in flux. But what is not left in flux, and you can see repeatedly, is that each one of these particular entities and independent authorities and also independent boards oftentimes and frequently have the ability not only to make rulings on their eligibility benefits for their pension systems, but also they supervise the investment of those funds and assets. And we all know what we've been dealing with on the bigger authority level, and those have just become more transparent to the public where there has been extreme abuses. And in this case, this particular amendment is about what we call cashing in vacation time. Now, for those of you who just joined the legislature in January, you may or may not be aware, but back in December, there was a nice report that was done as an investigative source in which another big authority lines were that more than 300 actual employees have the ability to cash in vacation time to boost their yearly earnings to actually go towards their pension calculation. And in this case, 300 employees per year, folks, cash in up to 3 weeks of vacation time. And for those who are getting ready to retire, sometimes that has meant a very lucrative position to be able to retire in. This has cost the Massport Authority on average between $750,000 to $1 million per year. Now, some of you might say, well, we've got language that deals with our overall state employees. But the caveat here is, how do you define a state employee? And the authority, I guess, would argue that we don't fall under the same kinds of jurisdiction that our state employees do. But just to give you an idea of what this meant and how it actually influenced an individual employee, one employee who actually had on top of their $295,000 salary was able to cash in 3 weeks of their vacation time, up to 6%, folks, allowing them to actually boost their yearly earnings by $16,000 and overall boosting their pension by almost $13,000 per year. Now, I wouldn't mind, except the fact that the actual authority got into the public's face by saying if someone chooses not to take the vacation time they have rightfully earned, we believe they should be compensated for this. This is not something that was germane only to the Massport Authority. Actually, the Mass Housing Finance Authority was allowing people to cash in a week's vacation time to boost their yearly earnings. Now, what this brings about is that there are extreme inequities and lucrative benefit policies that we are not privy to, but we sure as heck get blamed for it every day of the week when another story comes out. Even the Mass taxpayers has come out and said these are extremely unusual and lucrative arrangements and they're not found in any public or private sector entities. If that wasn't bad enough, for those of you who are new to the legislature, back in 2006, there was a whole nother issue of unused sick time and being able to cash that in for 100%. And I only bring this up because of this. The authority that may have offered this lucrative and unheard of benefit to their employees, both management and non-management, more than 300 took advantage of this just this past year. They might now say we're tentative and we're going to remove the policy as they did in 2006 with their issue of unused sick time. But I'm going to tell you right now that if we think that every time we have to read a story that they're going to react by trying to fold in changes, then we're remiss, folks. We're remiss because we're not taking a very strong stand. Now, I know the committee chairs may argue that we have already indicated that we're going to remove aspects of compensation to a yearly base salary. But there is nothing that I can read, and I've read it pretty closely, that I believe says specifically for independent boards, independent authorities, or even quasi-agencies. And therein lies, I think, the culprit that we're trying to get at. And by not saying it now, we leave it open to interpretation. And folks, if there are two agencies that were already doing this, my concern is how many other quasis, independent boards, and authorities are doing this that none of us know about. And how many other stories are we going to find out about how they actually enhance their pension earnings at the end of their actual years of service? That isn't right. The regular state employees don't get away with it, and neither should anybody who belongs to any particular entity that not only has the benefit of taxpayer dollars, but does the public's business. And in this case, I don't want to wait around for another story to come out how they actually pay out because they've already offered this as a lucrative benefit, which they did on the unused sick time to the tune of 100% of unused sick time, which cost $24 million back in 2006. And if you don't think $24 million is something hard to press to come by these days, I don't think that even 300 employees that are taking advantage of a lucrative benefit like this should be able to continue to do it with some unknown deadline in the future. No, I think we should take action today. And the reason why I may not believe or hold true that we are actually addressing this problem is because I think there's a lot of areas in this pension reform bill that are going to be either put to study, which means maybe potentially put out to pasture, or not addressed at all. And if we know and realize that most of the egregiousness of the offenses are taking place in quasi, independent boards and authorities, why aren't we putting that language directly in to not only the study commission, which we're going to form once again to study sometime in the future to get back to us? Why aren't we doing it there, and why aren't we doing it more specifically where we can't leave it open to interpretation? And this comes back to the fact that if we are really being thorough, and I said that the Mass General Laws just on this chapter alone are 500 pages, but when we have stuff that's still codified in law, like scrub women in the State House, folks, that was enacted at the turn of the century, in which scrub women who have had 10 years and have become physically or mentally incapacitated for labor by reason of any injury can continue to be considered retired with the sum of $3 per week. We still have that on the books, but we're doing pension reform today, folks. And that's something that the Pioneer Institute had pointed out to us more than 3 years ago. But I recognize that we're in a squeeze for time, and we've only had about 2 weeks to do this. But I'm hoping that maybe another provision that we think is perhaps a little old and archaic, like a veteran of the Indian and Spanish Wars, which would make somebody about 128 years of age now. We still have actual law on the books protecting those people and dealing with their issues relative to pensions. My point here is that if we're really truly interested in reform, let's make sure that we go after all the egregious benefits, repeal the sections that don't make any sense at all, and do true reform the way we should. Go after those who aren't the ones who are helping the system, but are the ones who are gaming the system. And in this case, this actual amendment prevents anybody who belongs to a quasi-public agency, belongs to an independent board, and furthermore belongs to any authority from being able to cash in or sell back unused vacation time to be added into their yearly base salary so that then in turn it gets used to enhance their pension benefit.